Captain Marcus Reed stood at rigid attention among the delegation of Earth's finest soldiers. The grand ceremonial hall of the Astrian Empire's palace ship dwarfed them all, its crystalline ceiling stretching hundreds of feet above, refracting starlight in patterns that mimicked the Empire's vast territory across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. "Steady," Commander Briggs whispered beside him. "Remember, this is just diplomacy theater. Smile, bow, and don't start an interstellar incident." Marcus nodded almost imperceptibly. After humanity's disastrous first contact with the Vrex Collective, this alliance with the technologically superior Astrians was Earth's only hope. The ceremony today was meant to solidify that alliance, a traditional selection where the Empress would choose an honorary consort from Earth's military as a symbolic gesture of trust. The selection was meant to fall on Admiral Wilson, who stood at the front of their formation. The diplomatic corps had arranged everything. The Empress would choose Wilson, they would perform the ritual gesture of unity, and the treaty would be secured. Simple. The massive doors at the end of the hall parted, and the assembled crowd of Astrian nobility fell silent. Empress Valora entered, and despite himself, Marcus felt his breath catch. She was tall, as all Astrians were, standing nearly 7 feet with the characteristic iridescent skin that shifted colors with her movements, currently a deep royal purple that signified formal proceedings. The crystalline ridges that framed her face caught the light, creating a natural crown effect above her large, entirely black eyes. Unlike the more reptilian features of many Astrians, the royal bloodline had evolved more avian characteristics, giving the Empress an elegant, predatory grace. Marcus had seen holovids of the Empress, but they failed to capture her commanding presence. As she moved to the center of the ceremonial circle, the air itself seemed to bend around her. High Counselor Thax stepped forward, his voice amplified throughout the hall. "Today marks the joining of our great empire with the humans of Earth. As tradition dictates, Her Imperial Majesty will select a representative of Earth to serve as her honored companion, symbolizing the trust between our peoples." The Empress's gaze swept across the human delegation. Marcus followed protocol, keeping his eyes forward, expression neutral. Her examination would be brief, a formality before she selected Admiral Wilson as arranged. "I have made my selection," the Empress announced, her voice carrying a melodic quality that the translation implants converted perfectly. Marcus waited for her to approach Wilson. Instead, the crowd gasped. He felt a sudden shift in the energy of the room and realized with horror that Empress Valora had stopped directly in front of him. "This one," she said simply. The High Counselor seemed as shocked as the humans. "Your Majesty, perhaps there is confusion. The diplomatic arrangement." "I have made my selection," Valora repeated, a dangerous edge entering her voice. "This soldier shall be my mate." The word "mate" sent a ripple of shock through both delegations. The arrangement was supposed to be symbolic, an honorary position for a few months. Mate implied something far more permanent and intimate. "Captain Reed," Commander Briggs hissed urgently. "Say something." "Captain Marcus Reed, Your Majesty," he managed, his military training keeping his voice steady despite his confusion. "Captain Reed," she repeated, as if testing the name. "You will accompany me." Admiral Wilson stepped forward, diplomatic crisis written across his face. "Your Imperial Majesty, while we are honored by your selection, perhaps there has been a misunderstanding of our customs." "There is no misunderstanding," the Empress cut him off. "I have selected my mate as is my right. The alliance will proceed with Captain Reed at my side. Unless Earth wishes to reconsider our arrangement." The threat was clear. Refuse her choice, and the alliance would crumble. Marcus met Commander Briggs' panicked eyes and made a decision. He stepped forward and bowed formally to the Empress. "I am honored by your selection, Your Majesty, and accept my role in securing peace between our peoples." The Empress's skin rippled with patterns of satisfaction. "Excellent. The ceremony will commence immediately." As he followed her toward the central dais, Marcus caught glimpses of the shocked expressions of both humans and Astrians. No one had expected this outcome, and he could already see the political machinery spinning into crisis mode behind carefully maintained diplomatic faces. "Why me?" he whispered as they approached the ceremonial platform. The Empress didn't look at him, but he heard her response clearly, "All will be revealed in time, Captain Reed. For now, know only that of all the humans in the galaxy, you are the only one who could serve my purpose." A cold shiver ran down his spine as he realized he hadn't just been selected for a diplomatic role, he'd been chosen for something far more significant. And as the ceremonial bindings wrapped around their wrists, joining them in the Astrian tradition, Marcus Reed understood that his life would never be the same again. 3 weeks into his new life, and Marcus still felt like an alien aboard the Imperial flagship Celestial Dominion. The irony wasn't lost on him. He actually was the alien here, the only human among thousands of Astrians who regarded him with everything from curiosity to outright hostility. He stood at the viewport of his lavish quarters, watching stars streak by as the massive ship traveled through hyperspace. Despite the opulence surrounding him, sleeping chambers larger than his entire military apartment back on Earth, automated servants, and amenities he couldn't even name, he remained a prisoner in all but title. "The Empress requests your presence at the evening council," announced Terran, his assigned attendant. The tall Astrian's skin shifted to a formal gray as he delivered the message, his facial ridges tightening in what Marcus had learned was disapproval. "Another council where I'll sit silently while being scrutinized?" Marcus asked, straightening his ceremonial attire, a blend of human military formality and Astrian royal styling that the imperial designers had created for him. "It is not my place to comment on imperial matters," Terran replied stiffly. Marcus sighed. "Of course not. Lead the way." As they navigated the sweeping corridors of the imperial deck, Marcus noticed the now familiar way other Astrians averted their eyes, not out of respect, but to avoid acknowledging his presence. Only the guards watched him carefully, their hands never far from their weapons. The Grand Council chamber doors parted, revealing a circular room where a dozen of the Empire's highest officials sat around a floating holographic display. At the head, Empress Valora presided, her skin a deep, thoughtful indigo. All conversation ceased as Marcus entered. He approached the Empress and performed the formal bow he'd been taught, keeping his eyes downcast as protocol demanded. "Rise, Captain Reed," Valora commanded, her voice carrying that same musical quality that had first captivated him. "You will join us today." High Counselor Thaxa's skin pulsed an angry orange. "Your Majesty, the matters we discuss involve sensitive imperial security. Perhaps your companion would be more comfortable in the gardens." "My mate attends as is his right," Valora replied with a finality that silenced further objection. She gestured to an empty seat beside her, a proximity that caused visible discomfort among the council members. Marcus took his place, feeling the weight of resentful stares. In the 3 weeks since the selection ceremony, he had barely spoken with the Empress privately. Their interaction had been limited to formal appearances and ceremonies, always under the watchful eyes of the court. At night, they retired to separate chambers, the mysterious mate bond remaining unconsummated and unexplained. "Continue, General Vex," the Empress commanded. The military leader's skin rippled with patterns Marcus was beginning to recognize as concern. "The Vrex Collective has increased activity along our shared border. 3 colony worlds report unusual energy signatures. We believe they may be testing new weapon technology." "The same Vrex who attacked Earth's outer colonies?" Marcus asked before he could stop himself. The council members bristled at his interruption, but Valora raised a hand. "Yes, Captain Reed. Your people's suffering at their hands is partly why our alliance was formed." "Then I may have information relevant to this discussion," Marcus continued, seizing the rare opportunity to prove his worth. Earth's defense forces documented unusual radiation patterns before each Vrex attack. Our scientists theorized they were testing dimensional phase shifts to bypass our shields. General Vex's skin shifted to a surprised yellow. This aligns with our readings. How did Earth counter these attacks? We didn't, Marcus admitted. Not effectively. That's why we lost the Proxima colonies. Yet you personally survived the massacre at Proxima Centauri, noted a council member Marcus hadn't been introduced to, her tone suspicious. Curious that you alone emerged from a battle that killed thousands. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. I wasn't alone. My squad evacuated 3 transport ships of civilians. We did our duty. And yet here you are, while your squad is not, the counselor pressed. Enough, Counselor Mira, the Empress interjected. Captain Reed's service record speaks for itself. His insights on Vex's tactics may prove valuable. As the meeting continued, Marcus remained silent unless directly addressed, but he absorbed everything. He noted the political alliances visible in the shifting patterns of the Astrian skin, how some deferred to others despite rank, and most importantly, who seemed most opposed to his presence. When the council adjourned 2 hours later, Marcus expected to be dismissed as usual. Instead, Valora gestured for him to remain. Walk with me, Captain, she commanded once the others had left. They moved through a private corridor Marcus hadn't seen before, royal guards keeping a respectful distance behind them. You handled yourself well today, Valora said, her skin shifting to a more relaxed azure blue. Though you must learn when to speak and when to observe. Difficult to know the rules when no one explains them, Marcus replied, then added hastily, Your Majesty. A pattern rippled across her skin that might have been amusement. You may speak freely when we are alone, Marcus Reed. Then may I ask the question that's been burning since you selected me? Why me? What possible reason could the Empress of the largest empire in the galaxy have for choosing a simple human captain as her mate? Valora stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Up close, her alien features were both terrifying and beautiful, the crystalline ridges framing her face catching the light like faceted diamonds, her entirely black eyes reflecting his own image back at him. Simple, she repeated. No, Marcus Reed. You are many things, but simple is not one of them. Then what am I to you? He pressed. You are. She began, then paused as her skin flickered with colors he couldn't interpret. You are necessary. Before he could demand clarification, the corridor doors slid open, and High Counselor Thax appeared, his skin pulsing with urgent patterns. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. We've received an encrypted transmission from our agents. The information is sensitive. Valora's skin immediately shifted to the royal purple of formal business. We will continue our discussion later, Captain. As she departed with Thax, Marcus caught the counselor shooting him a look of pure contempt. The message was clear, he didn't belong here, and many would prefer him gone. Back in his quarters, Marcus found a small data crystal on his bed, a technology he'd never seen before. When he picked it up, it projected a message in Astrian script that his translation implant rendered into English. Not all welcome the human in our midst. The Empress has enemies who now see you as a weakness to exploit. If you value your life and hers, trust no one. Meet me at the lower observation deck during third cycle. Marcus closed his fist around the crystal, his military instincts flaring. This could be a trap, or it could be his first real chance to understand why he had been thrust into this dangerous game of interstellar politics. Either way, he would go. Because after 3 weeks of confusion and isolation, one thing had become crystal clear, his survival, and possibly that of the Empress herself, depended on uncovering the truth behind his selection. The lower observation deck was deserted during third cycle, the ship's equivalent of midnight. Marcus moved cautiously through the dimmed corridors, his military training keeping him alert to any signs of ambush. He'd come unarmed, not by choice but by necessity. As the Empress's mate, he wasn't permitted weapons. The vast circular chamber offered a breathtaking view of deep space, currently showing the swirling colors of a nebula the ship was passing. Despite the beauty, Marcus positioned himself with his back to a wall, eyes scanning the shadows. "You came alone. Good." Marcus turned sharply to find a slender Astrian emerging from behind a support column. Her skin was muted to a dark gray, almost black, making her nearly invisible in the low light. "You're either brave or foolish," he responded, tensing for possible attack. "I am neither. I am practical." The Astrian moved closer, revealing facial features that Marcus recognized. "Your royal guard," he said, noting the distinctive ridge pattern. "You serve in the Empress's personal security detail." She nodded once. "I am Lieutenant Nari. I serve the Empress, not the court." "That distinction matters now more than ever." "Why the secrecy? Why not speak to me formally?" "Because formal channels are compromised," Nari replied, her skin rippling with patterns of concern. "There is a plot against Her Majesty, and it centers on you." Marcus felt a chill. "Me? I'm nothing but a diplomatic figurehead." "You are far more than that, though you don't yet know it." Nari's black eyes studied him intently. "The selection of a human mate was unprecedented and has created factions. I notice the council doesn't exactly welcome me. It goes beyond political disapproval. Some believe the Empress has been compromised, that she selected you under duress or manipulation." Nari's voice lowered. "Others know the truth and fear it." "And what is the truth?" Marcus pressed. Before Nari could answer, the lights in the observation deck suddenly brightened to full intensity. They both squinted against the glare as the main doors slid open. "Lieutenant Nari," came the cold voice of High Counselor Thax as he entered with 4 armed guards. "Conspiring with the human? This confirms our suspicions." Nari's skin flashed a warning red as she moved protectively in front of Marcus. "This is not what it appears, Counselor." "It appears to be treason," Thax replied, his skin pulsing orange with anger. "The Empress will be informed of your betrayal." "The only betrayal is from those who would undermine her choice," Nari countered, her hand moving subtly to a concealed weapon at her side. Marcus sensed the situation deteriorating rapidly. "Counselor, I requested this meeting to learn more about Astrian protocols." The lieutenant was simply providing cultural guidance. Thax's facial ridges flattened in obvious disbelief. "A midnight meeting in a deserted section of the ship? Take them both." The guards advanced, weapons drawn. Nari moved with startling speed, pushing Marcus aside and drawing her own weapon. "Run," she hissed. "Find the Empress." Chaos erupted as energy blasts exchanged between Nari and the guards. Marcus hesitated only a moment before ducking behind a support column and making for the secondary exit. Military instinct guided him. When outgunned, tactical retreat was the only option. He sprinted through the corridors, alarms blaring around him. The ship's security systems had been activated, and he knew his access to the Imperial levels would be blocked. Instead, he headed for the maintenance shafts he'd memorized during his first days aboard, a habit from his special operations training that was proving invaluable. As he climbed through the narrow passages, he pieced together the fragments of information. There was a plot against the Empress. His selection had triggered it. And whatever the truth was about why she'd chosen him, some people knew it and considered it dangerous. 20 minutes of evasion brought him to the outer corridor of the Imperial quarters. Just as he emerged from a service panel, he found himself face to face with 2 royal guards. "Stand down," one commanded, weapon leveled at his chest. "The Empress is in danger," Marcus insisted, raising his hands slowly. "I need to see her immediately." "You'll be detained until..." The guard's words were cut short as the corridor shook violently, throwing them all against the wall. The lights flickered and emergency klaxons began wailing, different from the security alarm that had been chasing Marcus. "We're under attack," the second guard shouted as his communication device flashed urgent patterns. Another explosion rocked the ship, more violent than the first. Marcus used the momentary distraction to dash past the guards toward the Empress's chambers. This attack couldn't be coincidence, it had to be connected to whatever conspiracy Nari had been trying to warn him about. The doors to the Imperial suite were already open, guards rushing in and out in organized chaos. Marcus pushed his way through, ignoring shouts to stop. Inside, he found the Empress's chambers in disarray. A section of the ceiling had collapsed, and smoke filled the air. Imperial guards were evacuating staff, but he didn't see Valora among them. "Where is the Empress?" he demanded, grabbing the arm of a passing attendant. "Private chambers," the Astrian replied, pointing to a doorway partially blocked by debris. The evacuation route was cut off by the blast. Without hesitation, Marcus rushed toward the doorway, pushing aside the twisted metal. The inner chamber was filled with acrid smoke, making visibility poor. He dropped low, crawling beneath the worst of it. "Valora," he called, forgetting protocol entirely. "Your Majesty." A weak flicker of luminescent blue caught his eye from the far side of the room. He found the Empress pinned beneath a fallen support beam, her skin cycling through distress patterns. Even in pain, she maintained her regal composure. "The human," she observed, her black eyes focusing on him. "You should have been detained. Apparently your security has more urgent concerns," Marcus replied, examining the beam trapping her. "Are you injured?" "My leg is broken," she stated matter-of-factly. "And the beam is too heavy for one Astrian to lift." "Good thing I'm not Astrian then." Marcus positioned himself and braced against the beam. "When I lift, you pull yourself free." "You cannot possibly." Marcus heaved upward with all his strength. Earth's higher gravity had given humans one advantage over Astrians: greater density of muscle tissue. The beam raised just enough for Valora to drag herself clear, her skin flashing pain patterns in brilliant white pulses. The moment she was free, Marcus let the beam crash back down and moved to her side. Her leg was badly injured, the normally iridescent skin dull and cracked around the break. "Can you walk?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No. You must find the guards and—" Another explosion cut her off, this one close enough to shower them with debris. The room's structural integrity was failing. "No time," Marcus decided, and in one fluid motion, scooped the Empress into his arms. Despite her 7-foot height, Astrian physiology made her lighter than she appeared. He felt her stiffen in shock at the contact. Physical touch between mates typically followed elaborate rituals in Astrian culture, yet here he was, carrying her as he would a wounded comrade. "This is inappropriate," she stated, though she didn't struggle. "Dying would be more inappropriate," he countered, moving toward a side passage he'd noted earlier. "Is there a secondary escape route?" After a moment's hesitation, she pointed. "Panel behind the meditation altar. It leads to a secure evacuation chamber." Marcus carried her through smoke and falling debris, his military training taking over completely. When they reached the hidden panel, Valora pressed her palm to it, and the wall slid open to reveal a small, fortified chamber. Inside, the door sealed automatically behind them, cutting off the smoke and noise. Emergency lighting bathed them in soft blue as Marcus gently set the Empress down on a cushioned bench. "There are medical supplies," she directed him, gesturing to a compartment in the wall. As he retrieved the alien medical kit, Marcus noticed Valora watching him with an intensity he hadn't seen before. Her skin had shifted to that luminescent blue he'd seen only once, when she'd first selected him. "You risked your life," she stated as he knelt to tend her injured leg. "Despite attempts to detain you. Despite knowing nothing about why you were chosen." "It's what soldiers do," he replied simply, applying what he hoped was a healing gel to her fractured limb. We protect. Is that all? She asked, her voice taking on a different quality, softer, more personal than he'd ever heard from her. Marcus paused and looked up, meeting her alien eyes directly. No. I protected you because despite everything, I feel connected to you. I don't understand it, but it's there. To his surprise, Valora extended her hand, palm up, an intimate gesture in Astrian culture. Cautiously, he placed his hand in hers, feeling the unusual texture of her skin against his. The attack, she said quietly, was not coincidental. Those who oppose our union grow desperate. Why do they oppose it? What makes me so special that selecting me as your mate causes assassination attempts? Valora's skin rippled with complex patterns as she seemed to debate with herself. Finally, she spoke. You carry something within you, Marcus Reed. Something unique among humans, perhaps unique in the galaxy. A genetic sequence, dormant and undetectable to your human scientists, but clear to our advanced scanning technology. A genetic sequence? For what? For awakening what sleeps. For accessing technology our ancestors left behind. Her grip on his hand tightened. For saving my people from a threat they do not yet know exists. Before she could elaborate, the chamber's communication system activated. Your Majesty, came a guard's voice. We've secured the area and eliminated the insurgents. It is safe to evacuate now. Valora's expression shuddered closed, her skin returning to the formal royal purple. But as guards rushed in to attend to her, she kept her hand firmly in Marcus's, a public declaration that shocked the royal guards into momentary silence. My mate has saved my life, she announced formally. He is to be given full imperial protection status, effective immediately. As medics carefully moved the Empress to a hover stretcher, she pulled Marcus close and whispered words only he could hear. Tonight, come to my chambers. It is time you learned the truth about why you were chosen. Marcus nodded, aware that something fundamental had changed between them. The mystery of his selection was beginning to unravel, but with each revelation came new questions, and new dangers. What he did know with certainty was that the connection he felt with Valora was real, whether forged by destiny, alien biology, or something else entirely. And for the first time since his selection, he didn't regret being chosen as the Empress's mate. Marcus stood before the ornate doors of the Empress's private chambers, heart pounding. The royal guard stationed outside regarded him with newfound respect after his actions during the attack. They stepped aside without question, allowing him entry to a realm few non-Astrians had ever seen. The inner sanctum was bathed in soft, amber light that emanated from crystalline formations growing from the walls. Valora sat on a raised dais, her injured leg now encased in a healing matrix. Her skin glowed a calm blue as she gestured for him to approach. You came, she said simply. You said it was time for the truth, Marcus replied, taking a seat on the cushion she indicated. About why I was chosen. Valora's skin rippled with decision patterns before she pressed her palm to a sensor beside her. The chamber darkened, and a holographic star map materialized between them. What do you know of ancient Astrian history? She asked. Only what was in the diplomatic briefings. Your civilization is over 20,000 years old. Much older, she corrected. What you see now, our empire, our technology, is merely the second dawn of our species. Her hand waved through the hologram, zooming to a distant sector of space. 100,000 years ago, my ancestors built an empire that spanned half the galaxy. The map shifted, showing a vast territory pulsing with golden light. What happened to them? Marcus asked. They encountered something they called the Void. A cosmic force that devoured light, life, and even reality itself. Valora's voice grew solemn. In desperation, they created weapons, technological marvels beyond our current understanding. These weapons drove back the Void but at great cost. Our ancestors deliberately fragmented their knowledge, hiding pieces of it across the galaxy to prevent misuse. Marcus leaned forward. And this relates to me how? The weapons can only be activated by specific genetic keys, living keys. Valoris' black eyes fixed on him intently. Our scientists discovered you carry one such key sequence in your DNA. A sequence that, when combined with the royal Astrian bloodline, can unlock the ancient defenses. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. You chose me to breed with you. To create a child who could access these weapons. Yes, Valora admitted. The ancient texts speak of a convergence, a time when the void would return. That time approaches, Marcus. Our long-range sensors detect disturbances at the edge of charted space, the same energy signatures described in the ancient records. Marcus stood abruptly, anger flaring. So I'm just genetic material to you? A means to an end? Initially, yes, Valora said with brutal honesty. But that has changed. Her skin shifted to the luminescent blue he now recognized as a deeply personal color. She rose despite her injury and moved closer to him. The attack today proved something I had begun to suspect. Our connection transcends biology or prophecy. When you carried me from danger, I felt, she paused, searching for words. I felt completion. Marcus remembered the sensation when they touched, a resonance that defied explanation. The prophecy speaks of genetic compatibility, Valora continued, but it fails to mention how that manifests. I did not expect to find myself drawn to you, to a human. Yet here we are. She extended her hand, palm up in the intimate Astrian gesture. After a moment's hesitation, Marcus placed his hand in hers. The now familiar resonance hummed between them. I face a choice, she said softly. Between my duty as Empress and my growing feelings for you. The ancient weapons must be accessed to save our civilizations from the void. But I will not force this destiny upon you. Marcus stared at their joined hands, alien and human, yet somehow fitting together. How long do we have? Before this void arrives? Months, perhaps. No longer than a year. Marcus thought of Earth, vulnerable and unaware of the cosmic threat approaching. Of the billions of lives across multiple species that hung in the balance. If we do this, if we try to create this child, what happens to them? Will they just be a key, a tool? Valora's skin pulsed with emotional patterns. They would be my heir, regardless of the prophecy. They would be loved. The weight of the decision pressed on Marcus. His selection, once a mystery, now revealed as part of a plan spanning millennia. Yet, the connection he felt with Valora seemed genuine, unexpected by either of them. I need time, he said finally. To process this. Valora nodded, slowly withdrawing her hand. Of course. But time is the one resource we lack. As if emphasizing her point, an urgent tone sounded. The hologram shifted to show a message from General Vex. Your Majesty, the general's voice was tense. We've detected multiple Vrex vessels on an intercept course. They've somehow bypassed our outer detection grid. Valora's skin shifted instantly to alert patterns. How many? A full battle fleet, Your Majesty. They'll reach us within 6 hours. Marcus and Valora locked eyes, the implications clear. The enemy of both their peoples was coming, perhaps as agents of the greater threat she had described. It seems, Marcus said grimly, that time has run out. The Imperial flagship shuddered under the Vrex assault. Marcus stood on the command deck beside Valora, watching the tactical displays with a soldier's eye. Despite the Astrian technological superiority, the Vrex fleet had caught them by surprise, and the battle was not going well. Shields at 40%, reported the tactical officer, her skin pulsing with stress patterns. We cannot maintain this defense posture much longer, Your Majesty. Valora's expression remained composed, though Marcus had learned to read the subtle shifts in her skin tone. She was worried. The evacuation of the civilian decks, she inquired. Complete. Escape vessels are away. Another impact rocked the ship. Marcus steadied himself against a console, his mind racing through military strategies. They're focusing fire on sections Gamma and Delta, he observed. That's not standard Vrex tactics. General Vex's skin flashed with realization. They're targeting the royal quarters and the ancient artifact vault. This isn't a random attack, they know what we carry. The void, Valora said softly. They serve it, whether they know it or not. Marcus made a decision. The ancient weapons you spoke of, can any of them help us now? There is one, Valora replied. A beacon of sorts, recovered from ruins 20 years ago. But it requires the genetic key to activate. My key, Marcus confirmed. And mine, Valora added. Together. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. What had begun as a political arrangement, evolved through confusion and danger, had become something neither had expected, a bond that transcended their differences. Take us to the vault, Marcus said. The journey through the damaged ship was chaotic. Twice they had to detour around collapsed corridors. Royal guards formed a protective formation around them as Valora led the way to a hidden level deep within the ship's core. The vault door recognized the Empress's biometric signature, sliding open to reveal a chamber filled with artifacts of obvious antiquity. At its center stood a crystalline device that pulsed with faint internal light. The beacon of Astris, Valora explained. Our scientists have studied it for decades without success. Another explosion rocked the ship violently. The lights flickered, and emergency klaxons wailed. Hull breach on decks 1 through 3, announced the ship's automated system. Critical systems failure imminent. There was no more time for hesitation. Marcus took Valora's hand and approached the ancient device. What do we do? He asked. Place your hand here. She guided his palm to one facet of the crystal while placing hers on the opposite side. The texts speak of unity, physical and spiritual. Their eyes met over the softly glowing artifact. In that moment, all the confusion and doubt of the past weeks crystallized into clarity for Marcus. I wasn't ready for this, he admitted. For any of it. Being chosen, thrust into your world, learning about ancient prophecies and cosmic threats. And now? Valora asked, her skin shifting to that intimate blue shade. Now I understand your choice wasn't just about genetics or prophecies. Sometimes two people are drawn together across impossible distances because they're meant to find each other. Valora's skin rippled with emotion. The prophecy speaks of compatible genes, but it says nothing of compatible souls. That was unexpected. Marcus leaned forward until their foreheads touched, an intimate gesture in both their cultures. I choose this, he whispered. I choose you. The crystal between their hands flared to brilliant life, bathing the chamber in golden light that seemed to flow between them, through them. Marcus felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd experienced, not painful but transformative, as if every cell in his body resonated with Valoris. Their lips met in a kiss that bridged worlds, human and Astrian, soldier and Empress. The energy surrounding them intensified, spiraling outward from the artifact through the ship and beyond. On the tactical displays throughout the ship, officers watched in awe as a wave of golden energy expanded from their vessel, engulfing the Vrex fleet. Where it touched enemy ships, their weapons fell silent, systems failing. Marcus and Valora broke their kiss as the energy surge subsided, both breathing heavily. The crystal between their hands had transformed, now pulsing with steady, living light. What happened? Marcus asked, still holding Valora close. The beacon awakened, she explained, wonder in her voice. It recognized the genetic key, our combined essence, and deployed a targeted countermeasure against the Vrex technology. Reports flooded in from around the ship. The enemy fleet drifted powerless, their advanced systems neutralized by the ancient defense. The Ancient Ones knew their enemies would evolve, but would maintain similar technological principles, Valora said. This is only the beginning, Marcus. The beacon is calling to its counterparts across the galaxy, awakening the network our ancestors built. And the void? Marcus asked. We've gained time, she replied. Perhaps enough to recover more artifacts, to prepare. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Imperial fleet secured their victory over the disabled Vrex ships, Marcus and Valora stood alone on the private observation deck. The stars stretched before them, both beautiful and ominous with the knowledge of what lurked beyond. The High Council will formally recognize our union now, Valora said. After today, none can question my choice. And our future? Marcus asked, taking her hand. Valora's skin shifted through complex patterns of hope, determination, and something he now recognized as love. The child of our union will have a great destiny, she said, placing their joined hands over her abdomen. But the prophecy speaks not just of birth, but of partnership. Whatever comes, we face it together. Marcus pulled her close, this alien Empress who had chosen him from across the stars. What had begun as mystery and confusion had transformed into something neither had expected to find in the vastness of space, a connection that transcended species, biology, and even fate itself. Together, he agreed, as they gazed out at the galaxy they would fight to protect, not just as Empress and Captain, not just as the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy, but as two beings who had found each other against impossible odds. The stars seemed to shine brighter as they sealed this promise with another kiss, their destinies now forever intertwined.